Okay, we're going to go live here, recording the Danger Mike podcast. So I have you guys set up over here, YouTube, Instagram. We're just going to go live with some Q&As here. So let me just start the episode and then we'll get into the Q&As. Just so everybody knows, if you are in the YouTube or the Instagram live, feel free to put any questions inside the question box. I will answer those questions as they come in. Here, I need to adjust this so I can actually see the questions. But we're going to be answering them here on the podcast. So sorry, YouTube. I'm blocking you with my phone from Instagram. There we are. Okay. So here we go. Start the podcast and then we'll start answering the questions. All right. Cool. All right. Hello and welcome to the Danger Mike podcast. I'm your host, John Dangerstein, and today we're going to be going through just some Q&As from Instagram and YouTube. We are live with YouTube. Hey guys, we are live with Instagram. Hello, great to see you. And like I said, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the comments section or there should be a question tab on Instagram. There's also one on YouTube. So go ahead and check that out. We are here on a beautiful Friday evening and getting the podcast done. So jumping into the questions here. Well, let's do a state of the shop, actually. Let's do a state of the shop update. And also YouTube, if you cannot hear me, let me know because I'm not exactly sure if my mic is picking up. All right. Anyway, state of the shop. We have a week of coming dealing with some loose ends that need to be tied up. So I was dealing with a couple small jobs that needed to be done. They're not super high priority because they're not really high paying, I guess, but they were just local stuff that needed to get done. So we took care of that. Also finished up the bookshelf from, what was that? A couple weeks ago. So we took care of that, and then we headed into this week. There's a lot of snow this week. Took a snow day on Monday, which is really great. Be able to spend that with the kids. We are organizing the shop a little bit better. I'm going to be moving in a new air compressor here right away. I bought a really nice rotary screw. What do you call that? A rotary screw air compressor from Ingersoll Rand. It's a 15 horse rotary screw air compressor. It is enormous. I bought it for a steal of a deal. A guy in Billings had listed it for a really long time, and and he was just like, "Hey, I need to get rid of this thing." So I offered him $1,500, and he took it. So he's a great guy. He's a taxidermist in Billings, Tiny's Taxidermy. Awesome dude. Really love interacting with him or on Instagram, and then meet him in person. By the way, he's not tiny, he's enormous, which is probably why he calls it Tiny's Taxidermy. He's a huge dude, like tall, broad in the shoulder. So anyway, that's going to be coming in here right away. Actually, we'll just answer that right now. There's a question that says, do you have three-phase power in your shop? No, I don't. I'd love to have three-phase power. So if anybody from the power company says, hey, we want to bring you three-phase, well, let's go, man. I have to run basically all my three-phase machines, my CNC, my wide belt sander, my big planer, my edge bander, and my sliding table saw. All those have to be converted from single phase to three phase. Now, there are pretty simple ways now to do that. I know a lot of guys in the past have gone and decided to buy different motors, single phase motors to put on these units, but single phase motors that are high horsepower are really expensive, prohibitively expensive. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to mess with the different motors, especially with the circuitry that are in some of these things. So I mostly run off of rotary phase converters and variable frequency drives. Now, a rotary phase converter is basically it's a big motor, essentially. Power comes into it, the power spins the motor, and then it spits out three legs of power on the other side. So there's like a generated leg in there. There's a whole bunch of capacitors, start capacitors, and other things. You can buy kits to make your own rotary phase converters, and they're really not that expensive. Um, the most expensive thing is going to be the motor. But basically, what it does is it uses power to spin up one motor. That motor then, because it's turning, generates a leg almost like a generator, another leg of power. So three phase is three legs of power, whereas single phase has two. I know, confusing, but like say 220, you have two legs of power, and then the three phase is just adding one more leg of power. Three phase machines are usually a lot more efficient. Essentially, if you look at it, took a cross section of a motor and then pretended it was a merry-go-round. Two phase or single phase power is basically having two guys on either side of the merry-go-round, and they're each pushing the merry-go-round at the same time. So one guy pushes, and then the other guy on the other side of the merry-go-round pushes, and that's what spins that motor. Okay. Now, three phase, you have three dudes pushing that merry-go-round. So in three different locations, you push it. That's why sometimes once you get the motor actually started, you can turn off the rotary phase converter and run the entire system off of single phase power. That's because it's already gotten up to speed, and basically it's like taking that one guy out of the merry-go-round pushing deal. Now, that's a rotary phase converter. It basically you turn it on, it powers up that motor, it spits out power to your machine that you're running. Usually, because it has to generate that third leg, you have to have a larger motor on your rotary phase converter than you have that is powering. So if I have a 5 horsepower table saw, I'd need a 10 horsepower rotary phase converter. And the reason is because basically the power that it is demanding, the phase converter has to be able to produce. And usually that's just double. So some rotary phase converter companies, they rate their motors based upon what you're running. So if you have a 5 horsepower rotary phase converter, it'll power a 5 horsepower motor. But others say, no, we rate them based upon the actual motor. So they'll say, yeah, you need a 10 horsepower to run, a 5 horsepower motor. That's peak. I think they call that peak power demand. So you may wonder, hey, why would you buy a rotary phase converter? Why wouldn't you just buy another motor, skip all the other extra components, and just swap out the motor? Well, because a rotary phase converter can be used to power more than one device. So back on the wall, actually right there, right there is the panel. Sorry, you can't see it Instagram, but right back there is the panel for my rotary phase converter. It's a 60 horse rotary phase converter. And it's hooked up to power my wide belt sander and my table saw and my big planer. And so I can't run those simultaneously, but I can run them individually. I think I can simultaneously run my table saw and the planer, because both of those are like a 7 horsepower motor, but I have to start them individually because once it gets up to RPM, it doesn't take as much power to run. So just so everybody knows who's watching the live streams, you can throw a comment in the comment section. And then I'll be able to answer it here in the live stream. Let's see here. So there's the rotary phase converters. The only problem with those is that they do take a lot more power than what you would normally run that motor on. So for me to run my rotary phase converter to then power my table saw, it takes up more power than the table saw would use just on its own. Does that make sense? So they're not terribly efficient, but they do work well, and it's a plug and play item. Well, if you know how to wire it up, I suppose. And then there's what's called a variable frequency drive. Now that uses circuitry to basically, I want to say it uses the power coming in and it shifts how it's distributed across those three legs of power. Now, I may be wrong. I don't understand how a variable frequency drives works as much as I do a rotary phase converter, but I'm assuming it generates that third leg of power by pulsing the power across those different legs of power in order to get it to work or to spin up. I'm not 100% sure. There is actually a really good podcast episode with Jack Forsberg. He answers a lot of those questions. The first half hour of the podcast, if not more, if I can remember correctly, is all Jack talking about variable frequency drives, which is excellent. That's who I get all mine from. Basically, you order the variable frequency drive based on the size of your motor. You also send him you take a picture of the motor tag that shows him the RPM rate, the horsepower, the frequency, all that of the motor. And then he selects the variable frequency drive that'll fit that motor and he sends it to you. And then once you get it, you have to program it. So it is, I don't think I have one in frame. There's actually one right there. It powers my dust collector. Oh yeah, my dust collector is 3-phase, so it runs off 3 phases as well. But there's a variable frequency drive right back there. Basically, it looks like a big control box. You have single phase power coming in, 3 legs of power going out, and then in order to get it to run the machine, you need basically he just asks you questions. What's the RPM rate? What's the start? Okay, we'll control how fast this thing starts, how fast it slows down. There's a ton you can do with variable frequency drives. So like you can have it start remotely with like a Bluetooth remote. It works really, really well. There's a ton of different things you can do. Say like on my dust collector, I was talking with Jack in that one podcast. He'll be able to flesh out a lot better. But basically, he was saying I could put airflow meters in my ducting, and then have those speak to my variable frequency drive, and it'll adjust the RPM of the dust collector in order to keep the flow, the CFM, at a constant rate. And so that also means that if I'm running the CNC and say the wide belt, which I wouldn't do because I only have a 200 amp panel here in the shop, but he was saying that you could, if there's more chip load or demand on the dust collector, it'll increase the RPM in order to keep it at that constant rate. Or if there's less, dust being sucked up and less, I don't know what you say, less demand on the air or dust collector, it'll lower the RPM rate. So that's pretty cool. There's a ton of different things you can do with them. I have not anywhere near tapped the boundaries of it, but I have a VFD on my dust collector. I have a VFD on my CNC and my vacuum pump for my CNC. What else? I am getting a VFD for my for my air compressor that's coming. So, yeah, that's that. What is your approach for cabinet corner fillers? Well, it depends on what kind of cabinet we're doing. If we're doing a blind corner, like basically the cabinet does not continue to the corner. If you have a 90-degree corner, I wish I had better visual aids here, but if you had a 90-degree corner, right, and you had a cabinet away, like 24 inches away from the corner on one side and 24 inches away from the corner on the other side, it's more than that. It's actually like 26 and 3/4 away. I basically do a 90-degree filler off of both sides, and one of the 90-degree butts into the other one. So one 90-degree filler is just longer in order to allow that other one to butt into it. That's what I like to do. Some people like to make them um, ahead of time. I don't, mostly because you don't know what your walls are doing, and if say the wall is tipping in at the top and you have to shorten that filler in order to accommodate that because it's pushing in a quarter inch while your filler has to be a quarter inch narrower. So I don't pre-make them. I get everything ready. Basically, I make a supporting 90-degree at between the two cabinet faces, flush with the cabinet faces, and then I do a plant on after that that is flush with the cabinet doors. I like to have that nice flush reveal everywhere. I bring my fillers flush with the cabinet doors. I bring my finished ends flush with the cabinet doors. I bring my light valance and my crown trim flush with the front of the doors. I think it looks a lot nicer. It makes it kind of gives it that inset um, face frame look, sort of. It just looks cleaner, in my opinion. So that's what I like to use. Um, that's what I do for corner fillers. Say if I have one blind cabinet that goes into the all the way into the corner, then I just have a panel on that, and then I have a 90-degree filler that comes out from the other cabinet that's perpendicular. That's how I like to do my corner fillers. Like I said, people do it differently. Cabinetry is super subjective. Here's a question from Sawyer Smith Creative on Instagram. I don't know you, but you got a good state of the shop, i.e., state of the chop, i.e., stash and cut. Nice. Never seen your work. Why did Instagram put me here automatically? I don't know. I guess it's fate. You should stick around. Hey, fellas. Like I said, YouTube, feel free to comment, put a comment down in the comment section and I'll answer it. Okay, I tried the VFD for my Maggi, Maggi, but ended up just getting a rotary phase converter. Yeah, the VFD takes a little bit more know-how, I guess. They're way cheaper to do that. But like say one thing I did, that's another thing too with the VFD. You need a variable frequency drive for each motor that you're running. So say on my table saw, I have two motors. One motor that runs the scoring blade, one motor that runs the main blade. They're totally different motors, different horsepowers. I don't know if they're different frequencies, maybe different RPM for sure. So I'd have to have two VFDs. And I did on my previous table saw. I had a VFD for the scoring blade and I had a VFD for the main blade. And I just took all the circuitry out of the inside and I just put those two things in there and Bob's your uncle. So say on a thing like my edge bander, there's, I don't know, 7 different motors in there. There's motor for for the trimmers, for the buffer, for the pre-mill, for the conveyor, and so I just used a rotary phase converter for that. I got it from American Rotary. That thing is super quiet, great little a rotary phase converter. I love that thing. It's awesome. And it was fairly inexpensive. It was $1,200 for a 10 horsepower. And it runs that thing just fine. The one thing is true is that a rotary phase converter doesn't produce heat very well. So the heat pot, the glue pot on my edge bander takes a little bit longer to heat up than it normally would. But that's simply because I'm running it off a rotary phase converter. So anyway, any more questions in the comment section? Oh, of course, yeah. We always bring up Jack Forsberg's name. He's Jack English Machines on Instagram if you want to go check him out, and also on YouTube. Great guy, very knowledgeable, kind of quirky. Volume is super quiet. Well, we can bring you a little closer, I suppose. But I can't really do much about the volume. Is it connected to my AirPods? I think it is. Let's take a look. Yeah, it should be. I don't know what to tell you, man. We'll bring you a little bit closer. Okay. Any other questions from Instagram before I continue? Okay, I don't understand different languages and I don't have time to change that right now. So, okay. Here's a question from the stories. Now that you have the CNC, do you find yourself cutting many MDF doors or drawers? No, I don't do that. Mostly because I don't have a lot of demand for painted cabinets. I know painted cabinets is a big thing in a lot of places right now. It is not a big thing here. So I do not have a demand for that. Now, if I did, would I be doing it? Maybe. Yeah, probably. But whenever I need to do doors, I always order them from Lewis Cabinet. Lewis Cabinet is awesome. They're out of Utah. Their turnaround time is really quick. At least my experiences have been really good with them. Their packaging is really good. Stuff comes ready to stain. Now, that's the crazy thing. So I hate doing stain jobs, but I had to do one recently. It was a stained cherry job. And I wanted to test it to see if I could, because this is kind of a no-no as a finisher. But I took those cabinet doors off the pallet from Lewis, straight off the pallet, took it into the spray booth, and did a spray stain job on it, and it was awesome. So, yeah. Okay, somebody said VFDs can be scary. I always feel like I'm going to burn it out and make it a paperweight. I don't know what to tell you. I've been running VFDs, I don't know, 4 years. Everything's been running really well. The great thing about a VFD is it's a really good controller for the motor. So you can control everything about the motor. If your motor's running too hot, you can lower the RPMs on it and everything. You can control everything on it. They use it for fan controls a lot of the time because they're able to change the CFM for like exhaust fans for spray booths and stuff. So chop saws. Okay, that actually, yeah, let's talk about miter saws. I do have a question on here. It says, what do you think of the little Makita miter saw you just got? Okay, so if you know, if I don't know, if you know, I have a sordid past with Makita miter saws. They came out with a new design. Was it 7 years ago? 8 years ago? And it was praised to the moon at first. And then people started to see issues. We don't have to go through the issues here. If you want to see them, you can go on some podcasts or the my YouTube page. They're all over there and they're searchable. I have them on here on Instagram, but they're more searchable on YouTube. And so I was really skeptical. But the difference, there's a pretty main difference with the new Makita 8.5-inch miter saw. I guess it's not new, but it's sort of different. The fences are different. The base is different. So design wise, it's a little bit different than the bigger saws. The 10-inch and the 12-inch are all the same. They're all the same. And they even have the same D10 plate, which I have aftermarket versions of. Sold at packabletool.com. Shameless plug. If you need one, go get them now. They're available 24/7. So I wasn't sure what to expect about the little 8.5. Yeah, it's 8.5. I got it. I checked it out. Everything was looking really good. I checked out the runout of the saw blade. I always take those, the arbors off from either side of the blade, the arbor washers. I take those off and I lap them on a sharpening stone to get them flat. And it didn't take much to lap those flat. They're actually pretty darn good. So I put those back on. Runout is teeny tiny. Runout is when your blade has a bit of a wobble in it, and it goes through the cut. It'll cut one side a little bit more and cut the other side a little bit more, and it wobbles through the cut. So really, it's when you take your piece off, you'll see a whole bunch of saw ridges on the edge of the piece, and that'll tell you right there that you have a lot of run out on your saw blade. But this one was really good. Actually, run out on the Makita saws is almost perfect. It's very, very, very good. That's one thing I love about those saws. And then I checked to see if the rails were square, because sometimes when you go from the back position and pull to the front, that will be off. It won't glide straight. Making a miter saw is really hard, guys, and that's shown by how poor most of the miter saws are on the market. But the slide was good. The next thing I did was I checked the bevel. Okay. I know you may think, well, why does that matter? If everything else is square, the bevel should be fine. It's sometimes not. I had a little Bosch 8.5-inch saw, battery powered, that I thought was awesome. It was perfect in every way. Then I went and did a big baseboard job, and well, it wasn't big. It was just a really tall baseboard. It was like 10 inches tall. It's huge. And I was cutting the miters on it, beveled, obviously, because you can't cut 10 1/4 standing up on an 8.5-inch saw. And I was getting my pieces together, and there's a gap up at the top. It's like, what is going on? Is the wall that far out? No, it wasn't. What happened is that when I tilted that saw to a 45, it was square, and when I tilted it, it went out of square. So it was still at 90 degrees, but somehow that hinge at the back, that knuckle that it hinges or it bevels on, was not square. And that was it. I was like, that's it. Can't use it. Because that's the point of those little saws, is that they have a long throw in the slide so that you can cut on a bevel larger material. Well, you can't. You can't when that thing throws it off. And there's no adjusting that. There isn't. Because if you adjust it so it's square when it's beveled, then it's not square when it's, at 90 degrees. But this little Makita saw was perfect. I was blown away, actually, with how good it is. I put a full curve saw blade on it. Oh, man. It's an FS tool blade. Let's see if I can find. I do have let's see here. I got from Bella Saw. Oh, what's it called? I'll find it. Don't worry, I'm right at my FS tool. I'm right at my email right here. Ballew saw. Ballew saw. And let's see here. The saw blade for that one was the FS tool. So not Festool, but the letter F as in Frank, S as in Sam, FS tool, LH864. That is the saw blade that you want. I believe that is the 8.5-inch blade. But if you go to Bell Saw or BallewSaw.com, they're the reseller for FS Tool saw blades in the United States, because FS Tool is a Canadian company. All right. Okay, if you have any questions, put them in the question box. Feel free. Instagram is my only platform for marketing. What's your experience on YouTube? YouTube, honestly, this whole thing is just the Wild West. I'm right by the seat of my pants. I have no idea what I'm doing. I am a cabinet maker. I am not a marketer or a social media guru. It's all just throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. So, yeah. Oh, on that CNC question as well, I cut all my drawers, my butted drawers on there, whether it's a pre-finished ply, like a 1/2 inch Baltic birch ply, or I guess it would be a 12 millimeter Baltic birch ply. Or if it's just a melamine box, if I'm going to do a dovetail, I go and I order them. I order them from Panhandle Door. They do a very good job. They come totally finished, ready to install. They do a really good job. And they even, on the one that I got done, I had them laser engrave my logo on the top drawer of every drawer. Looked really sharp. So I like them for that. Lewis Cabinet does do dovetail drawers. They just don't have a finishing department yet. They will. They don't yet. So I order my doors from them and I order my drawers from Panhandle. So probably could go with one or the other and just do that. But right now I'm straddling that one. I tried the Vortex Tool dovetail set dovetail cutters to do dovetail drawers on the CNC. I did not personally have very good luck with them. Getting the Z height just right. I mean, everything was not perfect. It wasn't a tight fit. I was just like, I don't like this. And I don't want to just slap filler all over my dovetails. It was just not within the tolerances that I thought was good. I'm sure for high production, it's no big deal. Sure. And I know that they have lots of people that go out and they have like dedicated machines, CNCs, just for cutting dovetails, but I don't. I'd have to use the same machine. So, yeah, anyway. Okay, speaking of dovetail, this kind of question kind of dovetails with the previous one. Blah, blah, blah. How good is the Hilti miter saw? I have no idea. You know why? I haven't seen one in person yet. So we'll see. I'm going to head to World of Concrete here in a week. I leave a week from Monday for World of Concrete, and they will have it there most likely. So we're going to check it out there, see what we think. Should I bring my square to World of Concrete, do you think? Frank, Carpenter13 just asked me, John, I need your opinion on the final season of Yellowstone. I'm going to tell you what I think about Yellowstone. I live in Montana. Yellowstone National Park is about an hour away from me. So, we're right smack dab in the middle of this Yellowstone country. Yellowstone is set in Bozeman or just outside of Bozeman, and it is filmed up by Hamilton, Montana, which is a beautiful area. The scenery is great in Yellowstone, by the way. That's because it is Montana. But I watched the first episode of the first season when it first came out, and I turned it off at a certain point. Remember the guy? I don't know his name. He had this crazy horse that was super dangerous in the trailer, and he was so dangerous that when he walked up to the trailer, the horse made a crazy sound and lashed out, and you hear a big bang in the trailer, and the guy steps back and he's scared. And he backs it up to the round pen, which is where you train horses. I trained horses growing up, so I know a thing or two about this. He backs up this trailer holding this super dangerous horse. And then the next shot is him leading the horse out of the trailer on a halter. Number one, if a horse is that aggressive and it's going to, try to bite you from when you're standing outside the trailer, the very last place you want to go is inside an enclosed trailer with that animal. bad news. You die. If it's that aggressive, you die. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, nope, can't watch the show. If they can't get that part right, then the rest of the show is just going to drive me bonkers. So I don't care about the Yellowstone show. I know a lot of people like it, but I think it's no bueno. How's the Cantech Edgebander going? I'm very interested in this model and a 220 volt. It's been awesome. I have nothing but awesome things to say about it. So this last year, it was not on my radar. I wasn't going to buy another machine because I had just bought this CNC about a year ago. But I did buy the new Cantech MX350 MR. I think that's the number. The R is important because the MR version versus just the 350M, the R version does corner rounding. So it cuts. It's kind of a good way of doing it too, because it does a very good job. It's very consistent. And what they do is that they radius the ends of the cut of the edge banding. And they have a cutter there that when you have it in normal mode where it's 90 degrees, it cuts, just straight flush with the edge of the door. But when you hit it for corner rounding, where most machines have a router that comes around and cuts the end, kind of goes around, just comes around the edge of the part after it's been flush cut. This thing actually has a radius on the cutter that does the flush cutting. So the first, I don't know, half inch or quarter inch of the tooth is straight, and then the rest of it is like a 2 millimeter radius, which is awesome. So when you press the radius button, it moves those cutters closer to the edge of the edge banding, and it cuts that radius. Listen, I've used a lot of different edge banding machines. I've used Holzers. I've used Homags. Those are great. I've used BSEs. I've used Sahisa. This thing, the edge quality coming off of this edge bander is incredible. It's awesome. You get your trimmers. So on an edge bander, there's several different options you can get on them. Normally, you have a hot glue pot, and then you have end trimmers, which cut your end that cut the edge banding on each side, and then you have your top and bottom trimmers. That's pretty standard. Sometimes they don't do that. They don't have top and bottom trimmers, but most of them do. And then they usually have buffers at the end. The reason they have buffers is because if you have a dark edge banding, the trimmers that cut the top and bottom edges will leave almost like a milky residue on the surface, and that's just based upon how fast the part is running through and how that cutter burnishes the edge. So the buffer basically polishes that up so that it's shiny again. Now, what this machine has, it has top bottom trimmers, it has scrapers, which give you that radius that you're looking for. It has the buffer, it has pre-mill. Pre-mill, what that does is that you set the thickness of your edge banding on these cutters at the front of the process of going through the edge bander. And what those pre-mill do is that it takes off the thickness of the edge banding. So say if you didn't have pre-mill and you're cutting all your parts on a table saw, you'd have to account for the thickness of the edge banding when you're cutting all your parts. So you'd have to cut everything, say if you're using quarter-inch edge banding, which is pretty rare. But if you're using quarter-inch edge banding, you'd have to accommodate for that by cutting the door a half inch small, because you have a 1/4 inch on one end and a 1/4 inch on the other end. And you have to accommodate for that because your machine does not take that material off at the machine. You have to cut it off at the table saw, or you have to program it into your CNC. Now with the pre-mill is it does it at the machine. So you can cut, you know, everything exactly the size it needs to be. You need a 24 by 24 door, cut it at that size, run it through the edge bander. You set the pre-mill to the thickness of your edge banding, it takes it off. It does a really good job too. It also eliminates some if you're handling the parts and they chip like little microchips on the edges, it takes that off as well if you're using melamine, which I do. Pre-mill also means that you don't have to have different programs in your CNC for the different thicknesses of your edge banding. I just took all of those edge banding legends off. The CNC cuts everything exactly the size it needs to be, and I can do all that adjusting for the edge banding at the edge bander. I can adjust it so that, hey, I'm using, 1 mil edge banding today. It cuts off the 1 mil. Hey, I want to use 2 mil edge banding actually on this part of the kitchen. Then I can adjust that and it does it all on its own. Instead of having to think about it beforehand, make sure every part is right on the CNC before I cut it. Or if I'm just using a table saw, remember and account for that. You see, if you're into cabinet making, you understand this is where you make all your mistakes. Remembering all these different things that you have to do. And then when you get to the end, you realize, oh, dang it, I screwed that up and I made this too tall or I made it too short or too narrow or too wide, whatever. But we've all been there, and that's what happens. So pre-mill on this machine is awesome. It's a tiny machine. It is right behind me. It is like 10 feet long by 3 feet high by 2 feet deep. It's a tiny machine to have pre-mill, corner rounding, scrapers, buffers, all that stuff. And man, it is so nice. It is really, really nice. Before I had an old Sahisa edge bander. Actually, not that old. It's 2007. But I had to send everything through that. I had to double check every single time I set up the edge bander because what would happen is that things would get out of position and I'd have to readjust everything and make sure it was just right because a lot of it was pneumatically adjusted, meaning that the difference in air pressure and the air, and that was one thing that was too a problem. The regulators would not stay at the exact same pressure all the time. I'd have to go back and I'd have to adjust them to get the air pressure just right for like the guillotine for cutting the edge banding and But what I had to do with this machine is it was my first edge bander here in the shop. In this shop specifically. I bought it for $1,500 and I got it in and I had basically what it did is it cut the edge banding kind of close to the edge. And then it would trim it pretty close to where it needed to be. And then I had to take it out off this machine and I had to use a hand scraper plane to scrape the radius and I had to use an end trimmer to trim it. So essentially all it really was doing was putting the edge banding on the part with hot glue. That is better than using iron-on stuff because the glue is better and I can use thicker edge banding. That's good, but it was a ton of work, ton of extra work on the back end. Now this is what I like, and now I know I'm talking a little bit much about this edge bander, but it's a pretty big part of this year, and it's actually taught me quite a bit about business specifically, which is I had timed everything in my process. I saw how long it took me to cut the parts on the table saw. I figured out how long it took me to edge band all the parts. I figured out how long it took me to, I call it dressing the edges, getting the edges to where they're ready to be assembled, installed, all that stuff. And so once I figured all that time out, I was able to go, okay, I estimate that I will save this much time edge banding, or this much time cutting parts at the table saw, this much time prepping parts for hardware. That helped me to understand how much I could see roughly as a return on investment for the CNC and for the edge bander. So I bought the CNC November of 23, used it all last year. That saved, I estimated that would save me like 40% of my time with cabinetry, with cutting, assembling, all of that. And by golly, it was pretty darn close. I think it was like 38%, give or take a decimal point here or there, of labor. Now, if I was to tell you, hey, dude, this machine's going to save you 38% of your labor, guaranteed, you would say, what? You'd say, take my money. That's what you'd say. I can produce 38% more in a year? Yeah, you can. And especially with this new craze with TFL and people wanting flat panel doors and flat panel drawer fronts, and all you do is take it off the CNC, run it through the edge bander, assemble it, and it's ready to go out the door. Holy cow, man. Especially if you're making closets, that's a money-making machine right there. With edge banding, I found that it would save me about 10 hours per job, give or take. And it's pretty darn close. The last couple jobs, what normally would take me half a day, 3/4 of a day with edging, dressing edges, having to remake parts because the machine would damage them, or I would damage them when I'm dressing the edges. Yeah, it saved me, I think it was around 10 hours every job. Yeah, it went from like, I don't know. I didn't completely track that one. Great. I just spilled all of my vitamin D all over the floor. Vitamin F now. Well, the floor will be happy, I guess. You have a sunny disposition, floor. Oh, well, thank you. It saved me quite a bit of time, a lot of time. I can basically take parts off of that edge bander and assemble them. There's a teeny tiny bit of glue residue. And honestly, I think a lot of that comes from the glue that has gotten on the buffer wheels. And I bet you if I cleaned those, it would be better. Or if I just adjusted them, that would go away. That's unreal. I've never had finished quality come off an edge bander like I have off this Cantech. And it's crazy because it's not that expensive. It's like 23,000, 24,000, something like that, right around there. That's pretty darn good for an edge bander of that size with pre-mill, corner rounding, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So when is the next podcast episode dropping? Tonight, fool. Thank you very much, Justin Addy. Now you're on the podcast. Congrats. What's your process after primer, sanding, filling, and different grits? When I am doing a color, which I don't do very often, but I have done, and I have a good process with it. Basically, what I do is I prime, I sand to 220, sometimes 320, depending on how much build I have on the primer. And then I'll fill. I'll use a raking light and I'll fill all the spots that need to be filled. The raking light is extraordinarily important. And then after that, depending if I have to fill even more, I'll put another coat of primer down, scuff sand that so everything's nice and flat, and then top coat. Usually get away with only one coat of primer, one top coat. But sometimes if you don't have a high solids finish, it doesn't fill all the grain very well and you have to do it again. So that is my thing. You have to look at the data sheet. Look at the data sheet of all of your finishes because that's going to tell you everything you need to know. Some of these data sheets say you do not go over 220 grit. I know a lot of people that sand to 320. I know a lot of people that sand to 400. When I was a kid and I was right over there, I grew up in the shop. I was right over there sanding drawers, dovetail drawers for my dad. and I remember sanding them at 600 grit. But he was using a nitrocellulose lacquer pre-cat, and it didn't matter what you sanded it to. That top coat was going to bite into the bottom one because lacquer does that. When lacquer gets wet with other lacquer, it reactivates the previous coat, and they both dry together as one coat. So, but some of these finishes out there, they require a mechanical bond, which means you have to, if you sand it too fine, it's not going to be able to grab as well. And what that's going to happen is that you're going to have possible separation issues with your top coat and your primer. Possible. Depends. That's why look at the data sheet. It tells you everything. It tells you sometimes even the pressure that you need to set your gun at to spray it. So just remember that. Read the data sheet. It is literally a recipe for a perfect finish, or as good as they could get it in the lab. So read the data sheet. Do you price kitchens by the linear foot or per job depending on difficulty? Per job. I never do per foot ever. I never have. I find that it's a good ballpark, but I have to price everything on its own anyway. Most of my kitchens are very different, meaning that very different finishes, different design details, different hardware, different layouts. It just doesn't make sense. I know some people can do that, but I can't. I don't know. Maybe I could go back across all the kitchens that I've built and go, okay, let's just estimate this based upon the linear footage. Maybe. But I don't. I do everything depending on I take all what I do, this is what I do. I take all my material costs, which is great with Mosaic software. That's actually what I'm going to talk. The next question is on here. I have all those written down on my computer. Mosaic software does all that for me. I put in my design. I put in all the specifications. I can even put in all the prices of all the panels and what I want my markup to be, and it'll spit out a number. But right now, what I have it set up to do is it tells me all my material costs. And then I mark that up. And I know what I need to make in order to keep the shop running. I know what I need to mark it up. I also know what my competitors are doing, kinda. I'm not the highest cost, and I'm not the lowest by any stretch of the imagination. I find myself giving really good quality at a really honest price, in my opinion. I don't honestly, dollar for dollar, I think I'm the best value out there, period. The money that a person spends gets them more value, in my opinion. Some people charge way too much and their price is super inflated and they do really good work. But at a certain point, that price exceeds the value that you can put into a cabinet, in my opinion. And then it also depends on what's the word I'm looking for? And it also depends on if people are buying your product based upon your reputation. They're like, "Ooh, we want this brand." Oh, I want to wear Nikes or I want to have an iPhone. That's where it depends. So, what was I going to say next? I guess one thing I should do is find a way to plug in my phone because it's starting to die. We'll see how long this takes. So I do price everything specific to how much it costs, how much my markup is, and how much I'm estimating my time. And then I inflate it just a little bit because usually something takes a little bit longer. And I will not come to a customer and say, hey, just so you know, this costs a little bit more. Every single increase in price before I even touch or even start doing any of that work that I know is going to cost the customer more, I ask them, hey, just so you know, if we're going to do it like this, it's going to cost a little bit more. Or sometimes, and this is where having good customers comes into play. If you say, hey, just so you know, I screwed up on this and it's going to cost more and I'm sorry, but I can't eat all this. What do you want to do? And then either we change the design or whatever. I have not yet had to do that. Thank goodness. But I have heard of people that they have. And honestly, a lot of that stems from them not being very diligent in the planning stage. So, yeah. What other questions do we have here from Instagram? I have some written down over here. Freddie, you will be on the podcast soon. Freddie Roman. Did you get Mosaic before you had the CNC, and what resources did you use to learn it? Okay, great question. That actually works really well in here. It says, what do you use to design your cabinets? Mosaic, Mozaik, Mosaic. It's a great cabinet software. Actually, for a cabinet maker, it's very intuitive. It has all the lingo right, fillers, finished ends. All of the lingo is correct. I've used some software before that was translated from a different language. And so a filler was like an edge extension or a box extension. You're like, what the heck is that? Why am I having to learn new terms in order to design my kitchen? But Mosaic has none of those problems. It's very intuitive. I got it before I got my CNC. This is the thing I did. I was like, okay, I know the learning curve for a CNC is really high, and it is. But don't let that scare you, just so you know. And so what can I do to chop that learning curve down? I can learn the software before I get the CNC. Because the last thing you want to do is go out and spend, 80 grand on a new CNC and all the electrical and everything else. And then it just sits there while you're learning how to use it. You can access all of that software right now. Go to mosaic.com, download it, and use the lowest price subscription and learn how to use it. That right there gave me a huge step ahead because I didn't have to sit here and grind through all these training videos to figure out how to use it and how to export it to my CNC. All I had to learn was how to set up tool sets on the CNC optimizer, which was super easy. But the software itself is super functional even without a CNC. It gives you floor plans that you can give to your customer. It gives your customer a rough idea of what everything is going to look like. It gives you material takeoffs. It gives you hardware tolerances for, it's like, oh, this is where you need to put this hole and this is where you need to blah, 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 it tells you everything. So it has its own benefit even outside of using it with the CNC. Now, that was what I did. I got it right away, started using it, and then when I got the CNC, basically I just adjusted a few settings and it was cutting parts. So that was really good. Another one that I use when I need to cut specific things, like if I'm designing, I want this type of radius on this archway, or I need this thing cut out with a special shape. On the CNC or sign making, I use it's called VCarve. Let's see here, VCarve Pro 11.5. So it's 11.5 is the version. It's a great piece of software that'll tell you a lot about how to use your CNC. I really like that software. There are different softwares you can get, but this one was pretty simple and it was really easy to learn. So it does everything I need so far. Now, I'm not a huge CNC expert. I've used one and it's been awesome. I'm a huge proponent. This is my opinion. If I was to start everything over again, I would forego getting a sliding table saw and I would get the CNC first. The CNC is by far the best ROI return on investment I've ever had in the shop. It's a large dollar number, but if you have the work to feed it, it will make money, period. Straight up. Now, I was told that by the people selling the CNC. And that's great. And they were right, but I didn't believe them because they're selling it. It's like, what do you care about if I'm going to make money with it? Because you're selling it. And when it's in my shop, it's out of your hair and you don't care. You just want your money. So I was like, all right, well, we're just going to rock and roll with it and see how it happens. So, and this was a scary thing. When I got the CNC, I had talked pretty seriously with a guy. I didn't get no signed contracts or anything, but he had said, hey, we're going to be building a ton of condos, duplexes, and we're going to need like 8 kitchens right away. We can give you 2 to start off, and then we'll see what it's like and then go from there. Well, I knew that I was going to be able to meet his standards for sure. That is never a concern for me. It's like, I'll be able to meet the standards. I know I will. I do good work. They'll be happy. So I was like, all right, yeah, sounds good. It's like, I'm going to have to get a CNC in order to keep up, but I can do it. He's like, all right, sounds good. Well, I get the CNC, and the next I hear from him is I called him, or I texted him. It's like, hey, just curious, when you guys breaking ground on the first set of duplexes? And he said, oh, we actually aren't going to be doing those now because the interest rates are really high and we're not going to start developing those right away. And so I heard this, and this was at the beginning of January. I just got the machine in November. And I was just like, I just bought this machine, this $70,000 machine. And what I thought, the work I thought I was going to be feeding it is no longer there. What am I going to do? I mean, I would have appreciated a call to say, hey, dude, just so you know, this isn't going to go forward. I probably should have called him just to verify. I think in November, it was October, I had to sign for the CNC. And right around that time he was still looking, because he said they were going to need kitchens in February. So I was like, oh, I really got to get to work in order to get this done. So, but praise the Lord, the work came in, and I didn't have to worry about it. So it's not a big deal. And honestly, I really like that guy, and I hope to be able to work with him in the future. It was just really scary for me at the time and especially with my wife. It was a hard sell for Kelsey. She was like, are we going to be able to pay for this? And it was kind of scary there for a while. But last year, 2024, with the CNC and with the debt from the CNC and buying an edge bander too, okay, so I had to buy a new edge bander. I didn't have to, but it made sense. I had to buy a new dust collection system, the big turret right behind me here, 7.5 horse. And I had to do some things with my electrical, buy the electrical, and all told, it was close to, with everything together, close to $100,000 in investment last year. And I took debt on a lot of it. But last year was our highest revenue year that we ever had. We're paying off the CNC super fast. It's already half paid off. The edge bander is half paid off. And we're going to pay it off this year, Lord willing, which is incredible to me. So, and I'm a one-man shop. Let that sink in. I'm a one-man shop. That much investment. And I keep telling people, if you have the work, buy the CNC. If you have the work, buy the CNC. I went and did a job for a guy, a kitchen, and it was a TFL kitchen. I was able to cut it on the CNC, edge band it, and assemble it and install it in 7 days. 7 working days, it was installed. I had to do it really fast because he said his granite guys were coming to template on this one day. Well, it was installed by that day, but apparently, and then his granite guys didn't come for like another month because they were too busy. But it was cool because I learned that I could bust my butt and, get it done. So I'm telling you right now, if you're going to if you're thinking about getting a CNC and you're like, should I hire a guy or should I buy a CNC? Don't hire anybody. Go buy a CNC. That's the best ROI. What are you going to pay a guy to work for you? Probably 40 grand a year, if not more. A lot more if he's actually worth his salt. And you have to manage him. You have to deal with his own stuff. Is he a stable dude? Does he know what he's doing? Do you have to train him? Do you have to invest a lot of time into this guy and then he's going to go off or gal or whoever, is he going to go off and, and leave you in the dust? So it's something that you need to take into account. And that's what I was like, I'm not going to deal with employees right now. I'm going to buy a CNC. If I don't have work for a week or a month or whatever, at least I'm not paying them wages to come and kick dirt around, or I don't have the pressure of hiring somebody. The CNC has by far made me more productive this year than any employee ever could. Just saying, this thing's way more accurate than an employee too. And it'll be paid off in 2 years, and then it's going to just make me money straight up without having to invest anything into it. So that's awesome. Let's see here. What else do we have on the questions here? What's your approach? No, we already answered that. Let me just double check here. Sorry, guys, for the lull on the podcast side. I appreciate you very much. This is a great moment to tell you about our sponsor, Nobody. So if you want to be a sponsor, come join me. Yeah, the ROI is huge. Is huge with that. And like I said, I went with Shop Saber mostly because I've seen what low quality CNCs can do to a guy. You want to pull all your hair out. I want a CNC that when I did something on the computer and I send it to the machine, it's actually going to do what I tell it to do. And it's going to do it accurately. Do you know how many problems I've seen where you run an entire lift of material and at the end, when you're starting to assemble them, something's wrong because, say, the spindle is not square with the gantry and everything is out of square and you just cut up a whole bunch of material that is no longer of any use and invested a lot of time and the wear and tear on your tooling. Don't cheap out on a CNC. Now, the Shop Saver behind me, I'm unsure what their prices are right now because I'm sure they fluctuate because there's a lot of steel on that thing. That thing was, and if anybody's interested, I can email you my quote that I got from them, and you can see everything I got. I got based upon the experience I had with the CNC, which I got quite a bit of CNC operation experience, but not a lot of CNC programming experience before getting this one. But operation wise, there are some things that you want. You want an auto tool changer. You don't want to have that CNC stop and you go take the bit out and put another one in and then let it go. So you got an auto tool changer. You want the reference pins in the bed so that when you set your material down, you know exactly it's exactly where it needs to be for the machine to cut it. So you're not having to carefully maneuver this sheet in order to do, right there. Okay, that's good. You want those reference pins in there. You want really strong vacuum with your vacuum pump. You do not want to cheap out on a vacuum pump. Don't do it. Do not. Yeah, it's asking for trouble. Nothing is worse than having to remake parts because they weren't sucked down to the table well. What's the other thing? Auto, the tool touchpad. So basically what this is it's just on the auto tool changer in line with it. There's this thing called a tool height touchpad, which means that once you set your bits in your tool holders and the machine picks it up, you hit the tool height and it zips over and it slowly comes down on this pad, touches the pad, and it tells it how tall that tool is in the tool holder. So you don't have to input that. You don't have to input that in the machine. So it's exact every time. Tool height touchpad. Do that. I also got an Auto Z touchpad, which basically is another pad just like the tool height one, but you can take it and you plug it into the head of your machine, set it down on the table, press Auto Z, and it'll slowly come down and tell you exactly where the bottom of the sheet is. And then it'll be able to cut everything perfectly off of that. Those things save you a lot of time and a lot of fussing around. Now I went with a 4x8 versus I could probably fit a 5x12 in here, or sorry, a 5x10. It would be a little snug. I'd have to put I could do it. I would just have to put the vacuum pump outside, and I would have to get a bigger vacuum pump. Actually, before I do that, I would probably have to upgrade my electrical panel. I have 200 amps. That's one thing to understand too. Electrical, what it's going to cost you electrical wise to put this thing in. If you have a 100 amp panel, it's probably not going to work because you have to run the CNC, the vacuum pump, the air compressor, and the dust collector. And most of the time, you're also going to want to run your edge bander at the same time, because as the CNC is cutting new parts, you have time to edge band. So why not? So run your edge bander. With all of those things added up, I am super close to going over my limit on my 200 amp panel. So also understand that if you need to run other machines at the same time, understand that you need to have, they tell you the size of air compressor to buy or to have, like how many CFM you need in order to run the in order to run the CNC. I have a 7.5 horsepower, 60 gallon Speed Air 2-stage air compressor. And that thing runs a lot when the CNC is running. It runs a lot. So just remember that it's that green thing right behind me right there. It's out of frame for you guys. It's right over there. But like I said at the beginning, I'm updating my air compressor. So we're going to go from that to a 15 horsepower, 120 gallon rotary screw, which is super quiet. And we'll be able to work with that demand very well. So remember that. All those things, you have to account for them. A lot of guys say there's tons of hidden costs in CNC stuff. No, there's not. You have to pay for your electrician to hook it up. You need to buy the tooling, which is not that expensive. It's like a little bit more than a regular router bit. So it's not that bad. And what else? I don't know. I can't really think of anything else. I mean, you need the dust. You don't need the dust collector, but trust me, you're going to want a good dust collector. And the mine does a really good job. When it's done cutting, almost all the dust is off of the bed. It's awesome. 7.5 horsepower Torit Cyclone. It's called the Cyclone 24, made by Torit. It's a great great dust collector. And I got that thing for used for, I think it was $2,000, which is awesome because it's like an $8,000 dust collector. That's one thing. That's part of my idea with a lot of these tools too. If I can buy high quality stuff used, it's better than buying low quality stuff new by far. Okay, we're at an hour and 15 minutes so far on the podcast. Hour 14 on the podcast itself, 15 on the YouTube and Instagram Live. Let me just check a couple things. Number one, I need to make sure that I have what I need to power my phone because it's about to die. And I like you guys on there. Remember, if you want to ask a question, put it in the question box at the bottom. Okay, hopefully that'll fit. Sorry, guys. Oh, I might have to adjust this a little bit. Sorry. There. I'm doing just doing content creator stuff. Oh, I never thought I'd do this as a cabinet maker. Okay. What other questions we have? Where do I live? Montana. Near Billings, Montana. Beautiful, beautiful place. Lived here. Our family's been here since 1906. Came from Norway. So living on family land, which is lovely. What do you think of the new decked cargo glide? Oh, yes. So I did get a new decked cargo glide just recently. I kept the original frame in my truck, and I just took they call it the tray, which is the part that slides out. I just put the new tray in, and totally matches up with the old frame, which is perfect. 2,000-pound capacity, so it helps with the payload of my vehicle, or it matches the payload of my vehicle. I think it's actually greater than the payload of my truck. But it's awesome. It's great. They redesigned the sides. They're a lot lower profile. I can open my pack out drawers from the side, which I couldn't do with the old one. So really, really good. I like the new Cargo Glide. It's awesome. They do a good job. They have full extension. That's one thing I really like about them. They have a full extension Cargo Glide made in the USA. What more can you ask for? Yeah. What software do you use for cabinet layout? I use Mosaic. We talked a little bit about that. Great software. There's a guy on YouTube called Hillcrest Cabinets. He does a lot of really good YouTube tutorials. That's where I learned a lot of it. Here, let's turn on the actual power bank. There we are, powering up. What's your next shop improvement? It is the air compressor, the Ingersoll Rand rotary screw. That thing is awesome. I'm so excited for that. It's quieter. It's 120. It's double the capacity, double the horsepower. It's beautiful. How'd you get into woodworking? My dad ran this shop. The shop was built by him. I watched him build it with my own eyes. He was a cabinet maker for a long time. I think he died in 2015 from MS. And let's see here, 2015, he was 63. And he had been in the trade for 35 years, 36 years at the time. So yeah, a long time. And he did mostly face frame, custom cabinets, built all his own doors, one-man shop. He had a couple helpers from here or there, some guys that he hired to help him in the shop. But for the most part, it was just him. Really high quality work. The first couple jobs I had when I moved back here, I lived in Canada for 12 years. My wife is Canadian. Finally convinced her to move back. We bought the home place, so I'm living in the house that I grew up in. Also bought the shop and everything from my mom. And so we're here, and I'm in the shop that my dad built, which is just awesome. So great. But where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought. Darn it. But we moved back from Canada, started the shop up again. Had to do a lot of work to the shop. Like even the lights were dead. They're all old fluorescents. I still have the same fixtures. I just converted them from. I took the ballasts out, direct wired everything, put in LED tubes. Works great. So yeah, we've done a lot of improvements to the shop. But my dad did all face frame construction. I am doing Euro style. I really like Euro style. He learned doing face frame, and that was what he was used to. So, the first couple jobs when I came back was building countertops for people that had him build cabinets for them back in the 90s. And the kitchens are actually looking really, really good. And one of them was in a house of one of my friends, and they were not gentle on things, just like us boys. We're not gentle on things. I have 4 brothers, and the kitchen still looked awesome. So that was really cool. I did countertops in there, did countertops in another kitchen that he did. So it was pretty neat, backing the screws out that I knew that he drove in. He was the last one to drive those screws in. Backing those screws out, taking the old counters off, putting the new ones on, putting those screws right back in. It felt really cool. So, that's how I got into woodworking. I was in the shop all the time. I just wanted to spend time with my dad, period. And so I was always in the shop. Your rabbit filler concept, custom mosaic file or library item. It's not my idea. I bought the file from Frost CNC. Nick Frost, he's a guy who does a lot of CNC training, and he sells CNC tooling. Actually, I remember when he was just another cabinet guy on Instagram, and then he started doing this training, and now that's all he does. He does training, and he does CNC support. Awesome dude. But he had these files for the Frost CNC fillers, he calls them. And they're great. You can, so you could do it yourself. You just have to know how to build stuff with like formulas and that type of thing on Mosaic, and you could do it yourself. But if you were like me and you're like, hey, I don't want to have to learn this right now, you can go and buy them. And he gives you the download, and they work great. So that's what I did. Any other questions here from Instagram? Don't think so. I do have a live request. Sorry, dude. If I don't know who you are, you're not coming on the live. Just saying. What other questions do we have? Yes, I am going to World of Concrete in the next couple weeks. Yes, and it will be fun. I hope. What's a cabinet maker doing at World of Concrete? Well, we're going with Makita. Makita is a sponsor. Really appreciate Makita. I've used Makita for years. You go to any cabinet shop in North America, I would wager, and they have Makita stuff, especially if it's an older cabinet shop. Like if it's a cabinet shop that's been around for a while, they absolutely have old Makita drills in there with the big stick batteries. Absolutely. Because Makita, this is the thing too, and I don't want to go on a big old Makita kick, but I will say this. Makita, their stuff is more refined than other companies. They just are. You want to compare them to the 2 other big companies out there, the red guys and the yellow guys. They're way more refined. Their drills are balanced. The battery or the motors are balanced. You pick it up and you pull that trigger, and everything just feels dead in your hand. That's because everything is super well balanced, and they do a really good job. Their triggers are really have really fine adjustments. So I find that Makita triggers I can control a lot better, which is great for doing hardware and that type of thing. Yeah, I just like them. Everybody, I know there's going to be some guy out there that says they use Festool, but let me tell you right now, Festool is for hobbyists. They've completely moved to marketing to hobbyists. They've left the pro guys in the dust, and they don't care. You see, and I'll tell you why, because you look at all of their events that they've had for the past 4 years, 90% of the dudes that are there are all content creators who only do woodworking for content, and the other 10% are tradespeople who do content online, of course. And but this is and this one makes me so mad. I talked to some of those guys that went to that event, and Festool wouldn't even pay their way to get there. They wouldn't pay them, flights, wouldn't pay for hotels, or wouldn't pay for all their hotels, which is so gross because those are the guys who actually know what they're doing. And I know for a fact that some of these people that they have going there that are content creators, they're not going for free. No, sirree, Bob. They are getting paid to go. And it's gross and it's wrong and it's stupid because the guy that actually knows what he's doing is the one who has to foot his own bill. And might I add, is the guy that's taking time off from his job to go to this event because he thinks it's cool and because he appreciates the brand. And these guys are totally taking advantage of them. So annoying. If you are going to start doing social media stuff, it's a complete value exchange. These companies are making tons of money off of social media marketing. And just because we as tradesmen don't understand it as much as some other people doesn't mean we need to get taken advantage of. So don't do that. Have goodwill. And I approach the whole thing with the thought of just like I do with cabinet work, which is I'm going to give the best value I possibly can to my customer, whether that's them as a customer for marketing with social media promotion or whether it's a customer for cabinetry. I'm going to give them the best value I can for their dollar, period. I'm also not going to do it for free. Okay. I'm not going to go down on my own dime, pay for everything, and then promote their brand. That is stupid. Especially at these shows. Oh man, there's a brand that will remain nameless, but I did a lot of work with them and I gave them a lot of time on social because I really like the tool, really like the brand. They're awesome. But they would want me to go to these shows and they wouldn't pay for anything. And at first you're like, well, why would they have to pay you to go to a show? You should just go. Well, let's put it this way. Their salesmen that are employed by those companies are paid to go. Their flights are paid for. Their hotels are paid for. Their time at the show is paid for. They're given a wage. Sometimes they're given a wage and a sales commission on top of that. Why in the world are they expecting me, somebody who they see as giving them value, why would they expect me to go there on my own dime, stand at their booth, sell their tools, or attract people to the booth? Because honestly, a lot of this is like we just enjoy spending time with each other. I want to meet people that are on social. I'm assuming that some people want to meet me and chat, shoot the breeze, because honestly, we're all just kind of the same people. Most of the people I meet at shows are just like me. They're guys working hard, trying to get stuff done and just living life. As the ladies would say, no free promo. Income and returns. Very much so. Income and returns on Instagram. But you see, like this interaction right here that we're having right now, that's essentially what happens at shows. With guys, we're all the same. Okay. But it's so ridiculous that some of these companies, and then they look at you like, well, what do you mean you're asking for us to pay for your hotel and then for your flight? It's like, yeah. And then you also have to pay for my time because I'm leaving my shop, my income, and I'm coming to do what? Make you money. That's a value exchange. What am I getting? Nothing. So it's And that's the thing too about all of this is that social media promotion is so cheap for companies. It's insane. Have you ever gone and bought a have you ever gone out and bought a billboard? Have you ever paid money for a billboard for your company? I have. It's expensive. It's stupid expensive, especially considering the amount of actual interaction you get with that billboard. I got 0 calls from that billboard and I spent like, I don't know, $1,600 over the summer. It was ridiculous. But when you look at these companies, you can show them exactly how many people interact with your post. You can show them how many people actually see your post. You can show them, and it's continually getting, you know, you saw my billboard. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, you didn't call me. This is the first I've heard, and I had that 2 years ago. But my point about all of that is that it's worth something. Don't give away social promotion for nothing. Okay? It's valuable to them. And just because we don't understand the value as much as they do doesn't mean it's worth any less. So don't do that. Okay? They need that word of mouth, and when they hear, when you give a testimonial or whatever else, it's worth something. So just remember that. Do not go out and just give away promotion for free unless you're trying to build goodwill with the company. That just makes sense. Hey, I want to work with you guys, add value to the relationship. That's essentially what social media is, honestly. And if people ask me this all the time, how do you build a page or whatever? You need to give value. You have to either A, be funny, B, have really good information, or C, or I don't know what else you could do with C. I don't know. You have to give value to somebody, either entertainment or education or information, or I don't know. There has to be a value exchange. And if you're not giving value, then you're not, the relationship is empty. What's the point? Why would I watch? So, anyway, that is my whole take on all of that. There has to be value, and especially if I, as a cabinet maker, I'm going to go to a show, not work in the shop, have $100,000 worth of investment in the shop sitting there, not doing anything. I need to be paid while I'm at the show. Okay. So it's ridiculous. But some people will go just because they think it's fun. And then they make these companies think that they could. Don't get me started. I guess I'm already started. Let's move away from that. It's super negative, and I don't want to be negative to y'all. Anyway, I guess that was a long way of saying, yeah, I am going to World of Concrete. And by now, I must be being paid to go to World of Concrete, at least a little bit. I'm not getting paid very much, but at least I'm covering my expenses. If you want to work with the brand, always approach their marketing department first. Oh, see, the thing is, I don't know that. Marketing people are different. That's why you see a lot of these people that don't really know the actual trade, who are doing really well social promotion wise. He's like, they're getting paid a lot of money to do all this stuff. It's because they know the game, man. They know more about marketing than I do, and I know more about the trade than they do. So that's why you don't see a lot of professional dudes on YouTube succeeding, because their skill set is their trade, not showing their trade. And then you have these people who have no idea what they're doing, but their skill is showing stuff. Oh, it's so backwards. Even craft fair bros want to yap about woodworking. I got to tell them politely to buy something or kick rocks. That was from Keaton Monroe on Instagram. That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, you know what? When I'm at shows, I do like talking shop. I find that it's good. It's good for me to talk shop with folks. You know, it's one of those things that honestly, at shows you're not inundated with people coming up and talking to you. It's mostly guys that come up and either A, they have no idea who you are and you just talk to them like a normal person, and share your expertise on the tool or on whatever else on the process, and that imparts value, and value is what keeps people coming back. Got to have value. So, speaking of value, I don't want this podcast to drain of value. It is 9:57. Oh my gosh. It's way past my bedtime. No wonder I'm feeling weird. Anyway, unless there are any more questions from Instagram, I don't have any more from earlier today. Yeah, business. Okay, there was that one question that I think I kind of answered, which was, how is your business year in 2024 with the new CNC? Worth it? Absolutely. And even my wife is super skeptical about these things. Even she was like, yeah, that was a really, really good decision. This is my main thing. If you got the work, if you have the work lined up, it will pay off more than an employee, more than a sliding table saw. That's the other thing too. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I said it before. I say it again. I'm moving my hands just like the orange man. This is what I gotta say. If you got the work, it'll pay. Also, it is a much smaller footprint than a sliding table saw. I know everybody loves the sliding table saws. I have nothing against sliding table saws. I actually love them. They're beautiful things made by beautiful people, the sliding table saws. But what I will say is that the CNC has a smaller footprint in your shop than a sliding table saw. It's true. I need for my sliding table saw, it's a 10-foot stroke. I have to have 10 feet on one side of the saw blade. I have to have 10 feet on the other side of the saw blade. 20 feet of clear space I have to have in order to run that thing. Then width-wise, I have 53 inches on one side of the saw, and then I need a whole bunch of space on the other side of the saw for my crosscut sled or crosscut fence, which reaches out to 120 inches. So that's right there is basically 14 feet, 14 by 20. That's a huge space. My CNC takes up, let's see here. It takes up 12 by 6. Half. Yeah, half the space, and is 10 times more usable than a sliding table saw. What can I use my sliding table saw for? Cutting things. What can I use my CNC for? Everything. Oh, nobody wants cabinets anymore. Okay, I'll make signs. Oh, nobody wants signs anymore. They want blocks or toys. I don't know. You can cut everything on a CNC. It's insane. If you build it, they will come. That is true. And that is where we're going to end the podcast. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the folks up here on Instagram and YouTube. If you are listening to the podcast and you say, hey, I want to sit and watch a guy talk about stuff, you can go to YouTube and watch the live stream. It's going to be posted there. But if you don't want to sit there and watch that and just listen to it in your ears, then you're at the right spot. What I would ask, though, is if you are a fan of this type of conversation, and if you like this podcast, if you would please go rate it. Rate it on your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. It helps me to be able to move it forward. The more, that's the thing. If you feel like you're getting value from this, show me a little bit of value back with a bit of a rating. And I love hearing your guys' reviews. If you have any questions or comments, or feel like you want to share your opinion about something, please leave me a comment on Instagram, direct message. I read almost every direct message that comes my way. Send it to me on the comments on this live stream on YouTube, or you can send me an email, John, John, at Steen, Stene, woodwork, singular.com. John at steenwoodwork.com. You can also write it in the review. Give me a bad review. I don't care. But if you review it, that would help me a lot. So thank you very much. I highly appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next one. See you later. All right, podcast is done. I want to thank you guys for watching and for hanging around. YouTube, I'm just learning this thing, so thank you very much for being here. Instagram, we're good buddies. We've been around. I just saw Jason logged on. Did you go away yet, Jason? I saw you on there, Mr. Fisher. We have lots of new snow here. Maybe you should come down and ski. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. We're going to end this thing right away. I will post this live stream on YouTube. If you do want to sit and watch me talk, I don't blame you if you don't want to. It's kind of boring. But listening to it might have some more value than just watching it. Anyway, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We'll catch you guys next time.